This is St. Patrick's campus. It's basically a college that's owned by DCU. And great thing about being here is we basically have like our own music building. So we can just be not quite isolated because we're sort of all over the place and everyone can hear us from the other side of the campus. But we have our own building, our own music building. And I like, it was the only photo I could find. That's one of the classrooms there. We've got stuff like I think every room has a piano in it. Every room in the campus has a piano in it, actually. There's some offices that just have pianos in it, just for absolutely no reason. There's a drum set in every room, and there's some cymbals as well, which drummers can use. Uh, Lots of amps, and just pretty much everything is supplied for you. If you're a guitarist, obviously you need to bring your own guitar in. If you're a vocalist, you bring your own microphone, and then you bring your own instrument in. Pretty much the only instrument you don't need to bring in if you uh, if you're a pianist, you don't really need to bring a piano in because that wouldn't make any sense. Um, the full title is Bachelor of Arts in Jazz and Contemporary Music. But if someone were to ask me what I'm studying, I would just say jazz because this is just a fancy title for saying that you study jazz. Um, this is the campus that we're on. It's very pretty. Um, Although our classrooms aren't really anywhere here. It's behind. It doesn't matter really, but you'll see it if you ever visit the campus. It's very nice to look around and see. Um, yeah, so this is kind of important here because a lot of music courses in Ireland don't really have a lot of performance aspect, which is kind of a bummer. But the thing about our course is that it's like mostly performance based. It's like 80% performance based. Even the modules that aren't performance based, they're not as heavily weighted in the marking scheme as the actual performance modules. So, for instance, you have to do essays. I think you do like one essay a year. That's pretty much it. Um, and the marks that go towards that kind of stuff, like theory-based stuff, aren't even as heavily focused. But what's good about it is that there is a very healthy balance between the theoretical side and the performance side. Because even there are some performance courses that don't focus a lot on theory, which is kind of annoying when it comes to actually putting the music into practice. You would kind of need to know a bit about what you're playing. And that's what's great about the courses. I think there's a very healthy balance between the theory and the performance aspect of it. This is also the only jazz degree in the country. So if you want to study jazz in Ireland, there isn't really anywhere else you can go to do so. All the lecturers, all the teachers here basically are majority of all the professional jazz musicians in the country as well. External examiners as well. Like, so for instance, we don't really have a euphonium teacher, but for instance, if you were to audition as with a euphonium into the course, the DCU staff would hire a euphonium jazz musician to come in and do euphonium lessons with you. All the teachers are professional musicians. They're not just music teachers. They are professionals. They are gigging all the time. Sometimes after class, they have to run out because they have a concert on right after class as well. This is like the main sections to where the instruments are split up. There are others here, but they all pretty much fall into these 6 categories. You're either a guitarist, a pianist, a bassist, a drummer, a vocalist, or a horn player. For instance, if you play violin, you're a horn player. You would, even though the violin isn't a horn, it would go in the horn section because it has the same role. It has the same role that all the other horn players have. So yeah, that's what a basic classroom has. We've got lots of instruments, but the teachers are very picky about what you're allowed to bring out. If you're a drummer, they'll probably let you do whatever you want. You can just take whatever instruments out that you want. But unless you play those instruments, there isn't really a need to be taking them out of the instrumental rooms. We have 4 ensemble rooms, 6, I think 5 or 6 on instrumental rooms, and then we have, I think, maybe like 10 practice rooms. The practice rooms are smaller. They just have a piano in them each. The instrumental rooms are just for like one-on-one classes. And then the ensemble rooms are these ones here where you do band practice. These are just some examples of some of the major modules you'll be doing. Obviously, harmony, ear training, and rhythm. So these three are the ones that you will be like continually doing throughout each year. There are three things that you will need to be working on, especially rhythm. We have rhythm every year. It's also the only, I think it's the only course in the country at any level that incorporates rhythm as its own module. I don't know why other courses don't do this. Rhythm, so rhythm is a very important module in the course as well. This is just an example of something you'll have in first year, jazz history. And then second year, you'll do stuff like African music, and the third year, classical music, and then fourth year, European folk music. Instrumental classes. Yeah, so there's the instrumental classes and the ensemble classes. So the instrumental classes is basically where it'll be you and let's say you're a guitarist, you and a bunch of other guitarists in a room with a guitar teacher, and the guitar teacher will be teaching you different techniques to play on the guitar. You'll also have one-on-one lessons with the teacher, so they're more focused on developing your skill individually. And then there is the ensemble classes where you are put in a group with other musicians and you have to put a band together and perform at the end of the year, probably in a club. I think the past 2 years they were playing in a jazz club. So you'll play in the jazz club at the end of first year, and then by the end of fourth year, you get to play in the National Concert Hall. And obviously improvisation, which is another thing that other courses don't really focus on, is teaching people how to improvise on their instrument as well. This is just like the basic audition. These are just the things that you need to do when or think about when you're doing your audition. It's not really like, you don't just go in and show off and go, oh, this is what I'm able to do. You don't just pick your best thing. You're supposed to show what level you're at. Usually pick something contrasting. For instance, I played a ragtime piece for my audition, but I also played a Stevie Wonder tune. I wasn't trying to put lots of stuff in the audition, lots of stuff that they can go off of. It was mainly just, okay, well, here are two pieces that I know how to play, that I like to play. Don't just play something because you think it's good. Play it because you actually enjoy to play it. Yeah, it's not just for a job as well. So you do have to be a bit enthusiastic about the course. You could come in and be an amazing instrument, like you could play something that's completely amazing, but if you don't show any enthusiasm, or if you don't seem like you'd be interested in studying music, then you probably won't be let in. You're more likely to be let in if you're very enthusiastic about having a music career, but your actual playing is not 100%. Yeah, you also have to enjoy listening to music as well. You can't just like, I like to play it, but I don't really like listening to a lot of stuff. You have to be very open-minded about that kind of stuff, because we'll be discussing a lot of different genres of music. Even you don't necessarily need to like every style of music, but I think it's important that you're able to appreciate every style of music as well. Careers, I'll answer any questions just once I've gotten through this. So here's something that one of our lecturers is always talking about. At least twice a year we get this thing from him. He's talking about, it's not just about a life. It's just not just about a career in music. It's about a life in music, This is pretty much what he says every time. To have a career in music, you must have a life in music. Music is a lifestyle, not just a career. So what that means is basically you are a musician for the sake of the music. The career comes with that. You don't just aim to have the career in music. That's not how you go about it. You need to go purely for the music, and the career will come with it. There's also like so many job opportunities. The thing about being a musician is that you can't really, it's never going to not be a job. You can't really replace being a musician. You can't replace being a musician with a robot, because a robot can't be a musician. A robot can play music. That's not being a musician. It's not really. It's not really the same thing. Um, yeah, I think this was from last year. We have our own society, and especially when our lecturers, so the thing about this is, especially when our lecturers have gigs, they're very eager for getting people to go to the gigs as soon as possible. So all the students pretty much get discounts just for being students of the teachers. I remember just walking in somewhere, handing someone €10, and the guy going, it's okay, go on in. He knew who I was. um, yeah, it's a very much like it's all about who you know, and like this course is a great way to network yourself, not just for jazz, but like lots of other styles of music. I've networked myself with so many different musicians just from knowing the people in the course. There's also great opportunities for working as a musician while you're studying. Like for instance, I teach piano. You can gig as well. It's very important. I know a lot of people when they go to college, they just end up working in retail or something that's handy, or I'm a college student, I need to have a part-time job and everything like that. I would say most of the people in the course don't really have those basic retail or food industry part-time jobs. Everyone's making their money from music. Even if they're not making a lot at the moment, their time and investment uh, is so dominated by the music scene that you can't really afford to not have a job in music, especially when you're studying it. And these opportunities won't come up, or they won't be as prevalent if you're not studying a performance degree. So in the meantime, let me just ask you this. How many people here are in fifth year, and how many people here are in sixth year? And then how many people here are in neither? Because that will really determine how much focus you need to go. So for those who are in fifth year, you have more time. Of those in your fourth year, actually, you have plenty of time to think about this. Just keep playing. Just any fourth years here, I would just say just keep playing. Just that's all you need to focus on right now. Fifth years, you would need to focus more on this one, really developing your style, which basically means like what style of music am I already good at? What style of music would I like to be good at? And can I obtain being good at that style of music? Doesn't matter what it is. Reggae, for instance. Let's say you want to get good at reggae. That's something, if you can do that by yourself, that's something you should definitely focus on. And you don't have to be perfect at that. It's just the idea of having a musical target and going for it and using your instrument to obtain that. This is also really important, I think. A lot of people sort of dismiss listening to stuff, like properly listening to stuff, not just having it on in the background, like really listening to something and trying to hear everything that's going on. It's really a great way to develop your ear. It's like going to the gym, but for your ear. Just developing, especially with the rhythm as well. It's something that's not on here that a lot of people don't talk about. It's stuff like beatboxing and dancing. I think dancing especially is very, very good for developing rhythm. You should just put a metronome on and dance and make your breakfast to a metronome every day, and you'll have a great sense of rhythm. It's just that's probably like the most simplest way of putting it. Um, this one's kind of self-explanatory, especially if you guys all have lessons. This is something that your teachers will probably tell you anyway, is to just work on your technique. A lot of people talk about the subjectivity of music and whether music is good or not. How can music be good or not? It's based on technique. Music as a genre or as a specific style that relates to people is obviously subjective. But when it comes to technique, it's very obvious when someone has not spent as much time as they should have on their instrument. Um, Now, for me, I can only tell that as much as to the level I am. But for the people auditioning you, they will be able to tell what level you're at. Also, this one, I mentioned this earlier, just learn to appreciate all types of music. Doesn't, even if you don't like it, you have to learn to appreciate the music exists for a reason. Every style of music exists for a reason. It doesn't just, people don't just like it for no reason. There's obviously something in every style of music that people enjoy. And also this, improvise, definitely. Because if you come to the course and you've never, made up something on the spot, it's going to be a really tough experience trying to improvise for the first time. Entry requirements. Oh yeah, there's a YouTube video here talking about everything. I don't know, you can't click that link, but if you could take a screenshot of that, it's on the main DCU Jazz website, so everything will be there. There's a bunch of videos on YouTube you can see. And I think that's, yeah, so I'll talk about that in a few seconds. I just want to answer some questions first, because I know usually when I do these, a lot of questions come up very quick. So a typical week, there isn't really a typical week. Every week is very different. There's a YouTube video on DCU Jazz YouTube channel that will probably do a better job at explaining it. Depends on your instrument, really. I mean, if you're a drummer, if you ever come to DCU at past like 7 o'clock in the evening, there are drummers everywhere because they have no time during the day to practice, and they're not going to go all the way home to practice drums when their parents probably don't want them to be banging drum sets all day. So if you're a drummer, you're probably going to be in pretty late, not because you have to, but because I think drummers find it more comforting to practice in the evening just by themselves. Every week, you go in, every class is different. Rhythm class is completely different to harmony. Another thing is, like, for instance, right now you guys are looking at me showing you a PowerPoint presentation, which is what typical college classes are like. But I've never had a class, except I think maybe one in third year, where you discuss classical music. But even then, it's not too important. A lot of the classes you go in, there'll be a lecturer there, and they'll talk about, I can't really describe it that way because every class is completely different, and every lecturer is completely different. Every lecturer it's each different type of hipster, basically. They all have their own opinions, and I think the different opinions are very good in the sense that you're getting different perspective on who you are as a musician and who you are as a person as well. Because these lecturers are very good at reading people. I brought in a composition once, and it wasn't something I was very proud of. I was just doing it for the sake of doing it, and just by listening to it, our lecturers were like, they could just tell exactly what my motivations were when I was composing it. They knew exactly what process I went through when I was composing it as well. They're very good at reading you as a musician, that's the thing. Is timetable very practical based on, there's lots of tutorials for each module? Yeah, there are a lot of tutorials. Well, there aren't, tutorials on each module. I think we don't have tutorials. Yeah, that's another thing. Like, if you miss a class, you can catch up, but it's very difficult. If you miss like 2 weeks of lectures, that's another thing about the courses. A lot of people in other courses, they can say, "Oh, I'll get that done over the weekend." They can afford to cram. In other words, they can hold off their work for when they need to work. The thing about our course is that we are working all the time. Like, you are constantly playing every day. You can't afford to like skip, oh, I'll leave it till the end. We can't really do that because you have to be constantly playing all the time. And it's just a constant process. And once you get into it, like, you really get into it. I remember in first year them talking about, getting us to not work too hard, maybe keep it to 2 or 3 hours of practice a day, which, by the way, is not fundamental, because you don't need to time your practice. You just get whatever practice you need done. But then by the time I got to fourth year, we were doing like 10 hours of playing a day, and I ended up loving it. I thought, what? Why was I so scared of doing 10 hours a day? This is amazing, By the time you get to doing 10 hours a day, you realize that, oh, this is what people meant by not cramming, or cramming early on, I guess, because you just want to play as much as possible. You will be bringing your instruments into classes where you don't even necessarily need to play them, The course is pretty much centered around jazz, but we do look at other styles of music just through the lens of a jazz musician. For instance, we do look at American pop music and African traditional music and classical music, but we would analyze it from a jazz perspective. 4 years is a lot of time and it covers a lot of material. Um, but again, like that's the thing about the ensemble classes is you can bring in whatever you want. You can bring in a pop tune, but you will play it from a jazz perspective and you will analyze it from a jazz perspective. You will not analyze it from a classical perspective. The harmony, the rules and the harmony are different. So it's almost like a language. It's almost like you're studying a language. The course is not just a practical course, it's a performance degree. You're getting a degree in performing the music, not just studying the music. Oh yeah, so the other thing I wanted to show was, yeah, there we go. Here's just some albums. Take a screenshot of that. Here's some albums I think everyone should at least know about. These are stuff that the lecturers talk about a lot. Not just like one or two times, but they will mention them throughout. Like you need to know, you don't need to like them. You just need to know that they exist pretty much. These are just like the fundamentals. There's actually a lot of other stuff that should be on here. But the thing is there's some stuff that's like so obvious that people would just know it. Like for instance, what's an example? I almost forgot to even put on Kind of Blue because it's just such a well-known album that I didn't even think, oh, of course. People have to know about this. Of course you have to know about this. About the history of all these albums and why they exist and why they're so prolific. And if you're not into listening to the whole albums just yet, these are obviously a bunch of singles that would be good to know as well. Especially going into the course. There's actually some that should be. Oh, okay. Hang on. Actually, I would put. There's one. Okay, I would actually put a Brad Mehldau album on here because one of my lecturers yesterday just mentioned it, and I realized it's like the fourth time he's mentioned it since I've started the course. Put it here. It's called Didn't Know What Time. I think Didn't Know What Time It Was. And that's by Brad Mehldau. Yeah, sorry. So yeah, there's a bunch of stuff I've even forgotten to put in here. But I mean, this amount of material. I'll show you the PDF actually. Again, might be easier to see. So just take note of some of this stuff. And this is just some stuff that people would know a lot about. You'd know the history of these. I'm not going to go into the history of these or teach you why. Can you tell us about the musicians who teach the course? Who are the piano teachers? How long of lessons, performs? So lessons, one-on-one lessons are about just under an hour. You have one of those a week. You also have group lessons. They're an hour long. That's once a week as well. And then you have your ensemble classes. You have two of those. So that's about, and they're 2 hours each. So that's about 4 hours. So already you're on 6 hours of practical lessons a week. That's just the stuff that you have to attend. Then there's also the playing you have to do outside the class as well. Obviously, you have assignments and not necessarily homework, but there's stuff that is advised to work on. Like for instance, your scales. In fact, if anything, if you can start working on your scales now, do it. Just get it out of the way, so that when you start the course. Because I remember my first lesson in college. This was on Zoom as well, because of COVID. My first lesson was with the piano teacher. She said, "Do you know the modes?" And I said, "Yes, I know the modes." So I named all 6 modes. And she says, "Oh, you're forgetting one because there's a seventh mode." And I said, "Well, Locrian isn't really a mode, is it?" She goes, "Yes, of course it is." Okay, now learn all the modes up and down 4 octaves on the piano um, in every key. And that was my first day. And I had a week to do that. And I was freaking out. I thought, how am I supposed to learn all this? What's like 172 different scales, basically, is my first piece of homework. But by the next week, I just said, okay, well, this is how far I am. And I got through maybe 3 or 4 of the scales of like, I think it was like 172 she gave me. And by the end of the year, I had known all 172 scales off by heart, every 4 octaves. That is it's like the wax on, wax off Karate Kid kind of method. They give you a high stand, or not a high standard, but they set very high expectations for you at start. And they don't raise it or lower it. They just keep it where it is. And then if you can reach that by the end of the year, then you're doing good. And it's something that can intimidate a lot of people, but I think that's the point. It's not they're not trying to scare you, but they're trying to show you like this is what it is to be a musician. The teachers are all professional musicians. For instance, some of the piano teachers are Izumi Kimura, Greg Felton, Scott Flanagan, who has his own jazz club up in Belfast, and there was another one, I think, wasn't there? Oh yeah, Linda Adams. So these are all professional pianists. There's Ronan Guilfoyle, Conor Guilfoyle, Chris Guilfoyle, Shane Latimer, Aleka Potenia. These are all the ones who are working here at the moment. There's also external examiners. Like, for instance, there's a guy who plays trumpet who comes in to do trumpet lessons. I don't do trumpet, so I don't do trumpet lessons with him. But they're all professional musicians. They would not hire anyone who is not a gigging musician to teach any of the music classes. How is the performance examined? Well, in many aspects, we're examined on how developed our rhythmic language is, how well we are on stage. There's also etiquette that we'll have to learn in the course. How well we know. It's stage presence is also another thing. It's not just about playing your instrument. It's about playing your instrument well and being entertaining. Performance. Well, which performance? Because there's different performances. There's a performance at the end of the year, of each year, but that's just you just play. You're not. It's not really adjudicated as much as you're in class. It's predominantly continuous assessment. The lectures will not judge you entirely based on your final performance. It's mainly how much you've improved throughout the course. If you've taken the material into hand and what they say, then you're going to do well. I think first year is very easy for a lot of people. The main people who don't really make it through first year well are the ones who are, like I said earlier, are very intimidated by the work pattern, or people who end up, kind of being lazy and not working as hard as they should. Compared to the people who they're the ones who go through. So really, it's just all about getting the work done. If you get the work done, then that's all that matters. Any other questions? Did I answer that question right? Does that make sense, G? How many students are accepted? I think it's getting bigger. My course was on, I think it's usually about 20 a year. It's very small. By the end of first year, you end up knowing people in other years, and you end up knowing some alumni. I end up knowing people who were never even studying at the same time as me, and they graduated 4 years ago, and I already know them just because they like to hang around the campus. So I'd say first year roughly 20, but that changes throughout the years. Usually the ratio is like 6 guitarists, 4 pianists, maybe like 3 drummers, 3 bassists, and then all the rests are either vocalists or horn players. How soon after your audition? I have no idea. That is not up to the course. That is up to the CAO. It's not even up to the CAO. It's up to once you're finished your leaving cert. You get to know pretty much like right after you've gotten your grades from the leaving cert. You don't get a score on the audition. You just get accepted or not accepted. It's not marked. You just have an interview. You just play two pieces, and then you talk about the two pieces, and you talk about how you can talk about your experience in music, especially if you've performed before. It's definitely good to mention that. Uh, it's good to mention where you see yourself in 4 years from now. If you see yourself being a musician, uh, then it's also very good to mention that. I mainly just mentioned that this course was, it just seemed like the best opportunity for me to pursue a career in music. Because I still believe that, by the way, this course is the best way to pursue a career in music in Ireland. I don't know if that answered your question, did it? Be great if I could talk to people in person here. Uh, to do the audition online, if you don't live in Ireland, well, if you don't live in Ireland, I'd say you'd be expected to do it online anyway. I had to do it online, and I live in Ireland. That was for COVID reasons. If you're not in Ireland, in fact, I'd say most people don't, because majority of the people who are accepted into the course aren't even from Ireland. We get a lot of people from all over the world: Spain, Morocco, Turkey, Greece, China, um, Sweden. There's someone from Poland, Ukraine. I'm just naming countries of people. There's a lot of Italians as well at the moment. Um, I think there's someone from Oman as well. Most of the people now, I think it's becoming more Irish. Yes, definitely French. There was a French guy last year. Um, and the standard in France is very high as well, which I think is a reason a lot of French people come here, because the standard of jazz musicians in France is so high. The only time they actually get a chance to go is if they go to a country which has not as high standards. The standards in Ireland are definitely not as high as France. Is there a ranking based on Leaving Cert points? Yeah, so it's usually like it depends on the year. I mean, I'm not in control of the point system, but when I was doing it, I think it was pretty low. It was like 240 points. You also had to pass maths, obviously, to get into DCU. I think you have to pass maths. 240 is pretty low, I'd say. But you also have to get points from the audition and the interview. So it's not really the same as Leaving Cert points. Think of them more as CAO points. I think that's it, right? That's all the. Does anyone want to see the albums again? I think this is more important than the singles, because the singles themselves are on the albums, right? Um, these are just more like things that were very, very popular. Can you tell us the point from the audition and the interview, as in the difference between them? So the audition is you playing your instrument and people, or the adjudicators, judging your performance on your instrument. Um, the interview itself is just you talking about, is basically you talking, and them seeing how eager you are to be in the course. It's not very difficult to get in the course, but it is restricted. Like they don't let anyone in here. They're not going to let someone who they don't deem, is going to, someone who doesn't seem like they're going to pay much attention, or someone who doesn't seem like they're going to be very interested in the material on the course. So the points that you get added to the CAO. So I think it's like an extra 200 points. So if you get 240 Leaving Cert points and you pass the audition, You just pass or fail the audition. If you pass the audition, that's 440 points. So if you get, I think average is like 400 points in Leaving Cert. If you get 400 points in Leaving Cert, and then you get 240, or if you pass the audition, that's 600 points. That's not 600 Leaving Cert points. That's just 600 points towards the CIO for this course specifically. So if you pass the audition for the course, you're already up 200 points. But all that information is on the website, is on the actual course itself. No worries. No, you will not find out on the spot. You won't find out until you get your Leaving Cert points. Uh, the lect if if they could let you know, they would. But that information basically has to be kept for um, for reasons that they want people to do their exams, I guess.